Awesome. So thanks everyone for joining today for the Better Impact webinar. Today we're going to be looking at, is Volunteer Impact the right software for your volunteer organization? So my name is Didier. I'm the software sales advisor at Better Impact. As I said before, I'm based in Geelong, Victoria. I do travel around Australia a bit to other organizations and help implementation and other kind of sales related activities. So I consider myself a bit of an IT guru over the last 10 years, working with different organizations in different industries, but always being kind of IT related and looking to kind of transform digital landscapes and helping with that implementation process. So a couple of things we'll be looking at today. So common problems facing volunteer service teams. We see this quite a lot. A lot of teams have really similar issues. Things like using Excel, data privacy, managing everything in different software suites, using multiple kind of pieces of software instead of one. So we're going to do a quick program assessment. So basically, I'll be asking you 3 different questions that you can answer in the chat, just so you can get an idea of the similar issues facing other organizations. We'll be exploring why the right software tools matter. We'll be looking at a high-level overview of volunteer impact and going through a bit of a demo and showing you our end-to-end volunteer management system. A couple of resources that I'll be sending you at the end, a PDU certificate for attending today. So stick around for the end for that certificate. So common problems, too much data entry. That can be using things like Excel, using things like Salesforce that's not really designed for volunteers and volunteer management. Using disconnected tools to do your job. So as I said before, that could be using too many tools. So you might be using 4 or 5 different pieces of software to essentially do the same thing. That can get really frustrating. I've definitely been there before in previous jobs. Not enough time to lead and engage your volunteers. So this is a really big one for us. We want to free up time so you can engage and lead your volunteers. That's a really big part of volunteer management. We want our system to basically free that time up for you, make things really simple, and kind of, take you away from that admin kind of role and those admin tasks, and focus on your volunteers and really engaging with them and their time. Finding affordable tools leadership will approve. This is a really big one at the moment. Of course, everyone's kind of feeling the effects of inflation. Everyone seems to be really bumping up their prices at the moment. So we understand that. We want to make things easy in that approval process. So we're, really transparent with our pricing and finding the right package for you guys and getting the most value, with everything we offer. Insufficient security of your confidential volunteer data. This is a massive one in Australia at the moment. Data security, obviously a really, really big thing. Huge focus with the larger companies in Australia, but also the non-profits and hospitals and, other organizations that have that massive need for data security. Of course, in Australia, we've had the last couple of years quite a few kind of data breaches. Optus, Medibank, a couple of other really big data breaches that have impacted a lot of people. So we have a huge focus on data security and how to keep that data confidential. And just to note on that as well, that the data that you have in our database, it is owned 100% by your organization. Us as an organization, we only own the code. So all your data is owned by yourselves and your organization. And of course, security is one of our number one priorities, or a huge priority for us. So we try to make volunteer impact really kind of help with all these problems. We're an end-to-end volunteer management system. So we try and do everything in that process. We understand it can be, quite a tough process sometimes, dealing with a lot of different volunteers, a lot of different demographics. But we are an all-in-one solution to manage your volunteers. So continuing the topic of data security, this is a really big thing to look at when you are exploring volunteer management software. So one really easy way to tell if the organization has data security as a priority is the ISO certification. So ISO 27001 is the world's best known standard for information security management. ISO certification means that the organization respects all the best practices and principles in the international standard. Having the certificate rather than simply following the guidelines is an important distinction. That actually means that the vendor is being audited every year. And that basically is a really easy way to see that their standards are being met. So that's something we do on a yearly basis. It's a really kind of intense audit they do of all our systems. And that's something, of course, we do every year, but it's a major focus of ours to kind of make sure that security and privacy is up to the best standards possible. And if you are exploring volunteer management software, that's a really important thing to look for. Okay, so first question for everyone here. You can just write a number in the chat to answer. Which problem resonated with you the most from the previous slide? Was it too much data entry? Number one. Number two, too many disconnected tools to do your job. Number three, not enough time to lead and engage your volunteers. Number four, affordable tools leadership will approve. And number five, insufficient security for your confidential data. So you can have multiple, but basically this gives everyone an idea if they're having similar issues in other organizations. Even though you're in different industries, you could be facing similar issues. So most of you have been having issues with number two, using too many disconnected tools to do your job. That's a really interesting perspective. I've definitely been there myself. You might be using 4 or 5 different software suites or software tools to do your job, but that can be really hard, trying to do everything in different systems and trying to manage that data. We've also had number 1 and number 3 come up. So too much data entry, not enough time to lead and engage volunteers. So often, using too many disconnected tools can lead to not enough time to lead and engage, or too much data entry when you're kind of using those tools and trying to do everything all in one. So question 2, how are you managing your volunteers currently? Number 1, spreadsheets. Number 2, volunteer management software. Or number 3, other. This is just to get an idea of what you're using at the moment. And quite interesting that when I do speak to people looking for software, a lot of people are using spreadsheets at the moment, which is pretty crazy to think about, considering the lack of security, lack of privacy, and just really difficult to manage your data there. So we've got number 1 and 3 using spreadsheets and another piece of software. That's interesting that spreadsheets can be used with something else. It looks like spreadsheets could be the most popular way to manage your data at the moment. Penny just started using Better Impact, so hopefully that improves the way you kind of manage your volunteers. Previously she was using spreadsheets, so hopefully that is a nice improvement for you. And just so everyone knows as well, when you do start with Better Impact, we do offer basically a import of your data. So if you do have your information in spreadsheets, we do an import via a spreadsheet CSV file. So that's a good way to get your initial data into the database and start off kind of ahead of the game. Laurie uses a custom access database. So that's interesting. A lot of organizations do have, custom software that's built for specific purposes. The difficult thing with that is having to manage the software in terms of any bugs that might potentially come up, any issues. It's managed in-house. That can be really difficult. I have dealt with that before in a job a couple of years ago, and it kind of adds a little bit of frustration to the software you're using, and that's something our developers are really strong with. Very limited amount of issues, lots of improvements at the moment. So that's something Better Impact's really covered for at the moment. All right, so last question. In your opinion, what is most at risk if a change doesn't occur sooner than later? So is it number 1, volunteer turnover, disengagement? Number 2, staff turnover, disengagement? Number 3, wasted budget? Number 4, damage to organization program reputation? Or number 5, other? Again, it could be multiple, but a good idea to get some information on what you think is most at risk if something doesn't change or a change doesn't occur sooner or later. So I'll wait for some answers in the chat. Penny's number 4, volunteer turnover, disengagement, and damage to organization program reputation. That's really interesting because that obviously can work hand in hand. If you've got damage to the reputation, less and less volunteers will be signing up. We've got one that's 3 and 5, so wasted budget and other. Be interested to hear what the other issue is, Laurie, if you can. Carla, number 1 and 3, so volunteer turnover and wasted budget. Laurie's other was wasted staff time and burnout. That definitely is a big thing that you can worry about when you don't have a good plan in place and a good volunteer management system in place. That's definitely something that does come up quite often when I'm discussing that with organizations looking for software. We've got another one, 1 and 4, so turnover and damage to organization program reputation. That's a big one, the damage to reputation. I know in Australia a lot of word of mouth goes around quite fast with volunteers. If there's something like the software is not working well for them, or they're using the wrong software, it can travel quite fast, the word. That's definitely something we don't want. Our volunteer side is really simple, really easy to use, and the volunteers are really only using a few of the features, such as doing their hours, signing up for activities, doing e-learning training, and then signing documents, uploading documents, that kind of thing as well. So we focus on the main things they need to do in the most important areas to avoid that damage to reputation and obviously that volunteer turnover and disengagement. So a bit of a not so fun fact, more than half of all employees are unhappy at work because of the software tools they're using. So have you become dissatisfied at work due to missing or mismatched software? I definitely have in the past. I worked for a number of organizations that were using software that really wasn't suited for the needs. So I can definitely relate with this one. Thankfully, where I'm at now with Better Impact, we do have amazing software tools to use. and all our staff around the world are kind of making the most of that and using our time most efficiently. But really interesting stat that more than half of employees are unhappy at work because of the software. To me, it seems like that's a really simple fix, finding that right software tool, but easier said than done. Also, to kind of lean into that fact as well, about 1 in every 8 employees has quit a job because of mismatched software. So following on from that half that are unhappy, you've got 1 in 8 people are actually leaving a job because of mismatched software. That can be really challenging, especially in this space where you've got volunteer coordinators or volunteer managers that are really, really important to your organization. A lot of people have got 1 or 2 people in that role doing majority of the work. So if you are replacing that person or looking for other people to do that role, that can be really difficult, especially if you're relying on 1 or 2 people. So we want to avoid that. Obviously, with Better Impact, our system very customizable, but also the good thing is we have unlimited admins. So if you do have a few people helping in the role, we can make that easier for you. We can have a few people doing that role all together and working as a team, and try and avoid that 1 in 8 people leaving a job because of the mismatched software. And of course, we're designed for volunteer management and try and do that whole aspect of that end-to-end process. So we want less dissatisfied people and more happy volunteer coordinators, volunteers, staff, everyone kind of, enjoying what they're doing, enjoying the software they're using. And of course, that's a big goal of ours, keeping everyone happy, doing everything you need, and getting more positive outlooks really in the industry. Awesome. So I'm just going to go into a demo. Perfect. So as I was saying, the system is an end-to-end volunteer management system. So basically, what I'm going to show you today is the very start of that process to the very end, and then everything in between. Show you as much of the software as I can. So this page you're seeing now is what we call the landing page or the advertisement page. This is usually one of the first things a potential volunteer will see. This can be a link that you send out, email or Facebook or text. This can be linked to your website. So there can be a button on your website saying volunteer now, see volunteer opportunities, that kind of thing. Or it can even be a QR code. So if you've got a flyer or anything like that in person, either way, the volunteer is going to come to this page. It's all live data. So whatever you do edit is going to be updated live. You don't need an IT team to make any changes. It's all managed by your administrators in the system. So this page, you can obviously edit things like the color. You can have your organization theme at the top. Then you can have things like what opportunities you have for the volunteers to volunteer for. So basically, all of these roles, you can have a little bit more information, special events, that kind of thing. This is really a place to show the volunteers what you have on offer, to entice them into applying for these roles or some of these roles at the same time as well. So once a volunteer is interested in applying, they click in this fill in application button. That will take them to this page here. So most of the time they'll be creating a new account with Better Impact. They create their own username and email address. So that takes it away from you guys having to create that. There is an option to do this manually. And as I said, you can do an import of all your current volunteers. But for your new volunteers, they'll create a new account with us. You can have things like policies, disclaimers at the top here. Some good examples of that is things like please have your working with children's check ready to upload on your application, or things like privacy policies that are really essential for people applying, and gives them, an idea of what they need, or those really important policies they need to agree to. So once they create their account and confirm their email address, this will take them to the application form. The application form is 2 pages. Page number 1 is the really basic info. So you've got your name, address, phone number, date of birth. Page number 2 is the really customizable information. So you've got things like availability, so they can tick specific days, or they can tick, Thursday afternoon, Friday night, basically giving you an idea of when they're available. This is then searchable in the system. So an example of that is, if you need to fill a shift on a Monday morning, you need to see who's interested in volunteering for the gift shop. You can actually search for both of these via like a search filter, and really easily fill that spot. Or you can send out an email for volunteers to sign up for that role as well. So this volunteers can basically tick what they're interested in volunteering for, see a bit more information, but that gives you an indication of what role they want to do. Of course, the admins have that final say when they're doing that onboarding, but basically this is a really good indication of what they're interested in volunteering for. Then you can have things like qualifications. So this can be things like age range, how much can you lift, do you have a driver's license. Things can also have an expiry date, so this is tracked in the system. So you'll get a notification of things that are upcoming expiring, or things that are expired. And these can be connected to specific roles. So really easy example for me to explain is a driver's license. This might be mandatory for a driving role, for example. So if they tick yes, and you might add an expiry date to that driver's license, they'll be qualified for that role. If they click no, they're not qualified, they won't be able to sign up for that role. So a few things you can do with that, and you can basically connect different qualifications to different roles, make sure the right people are signing up for the right roles. Further to that, we've got things called custom fields. So basically this is any field that you want to create in the system that you want data to be collected in that application form, or at a later date in the volunteer profile. So this can be basically anything you need it to be. It can be text boxes, it can be drop downs with specific values, it can be date boxes, it can be uploading files. So if you need them to upload a driver's license, background check, working with children's check, you can do that. This little flag next to it basically means it's a mandatory field. So in this example, they'll need to upload a driver's license in order to finish the application. We've also got a new feature, which is a couple of months old, which is signed documents. So basically you can upload documents into the system, add a signature, a title box and a date box, and then get the volunteers to sign that. So that can be in the application form itself. So if you need that signature straight away, might be a privacy policy, that really important info that you need signed. That can be right here. It can be anywhere on the application form you need it to be. When they upload things and when they sign the document, it's obviously going to be saved on the volunteer's profile. You can even add approval steps to that as well. So if the driver's license is a really important document that you need to validate before you approve it, you can put an approval step on that field, so that all the approvals will come into the one section. And I'll show you that in a second when I go to the database. You can also have things like references, emergency contact. yeah, basically anything you want to customize as a custom field, you can do that in the system. Once the volunteer submits the application, they're going to get an automated message. So that's either going to be a message on the screen or it's going to be an automated email. So that's an important step, because basically what that is, that means it's a really easy way to communicate with all your applicants. You don't have to do that manually. And if you've got a really obvious next step on that application, it might be something like e-learning training you need to be done. It might be things they need to sign, do an interview, a phone call, whatever your process is, you can automate that so that as soon as the application comes in, they can get an automated message. Thanks for your application. Please complete this e-learning. Someone will call you shortly to confirm an interview, as an example. So as well as that, the volunteer application or the volunteer's profile will go into one of these statuses here. Now, majority of the time, they'll go in as an applicant. That's basically if you need to do any vetting, if you need, any interviews or anything to kind of help with that onboarding process before you accept them into the program. You can skip that step. Some organizations don't need to do any vetting. They're basically accepting everyone who applies. You can configure that, but most of the time they'll be coming in as an applicant. You can click on that applicant number. You can go in and view that application and what they've entered in that application form. Then from here, you can basically in bulk or individually send out emails, text messages, whatever it is you need to do. We can have templates. So if you do need to do an interview, that code is going to be the first name of the volunteer. So you can do this in bulk. If you got, 50, 100 applications coming in at one time, you can communicate with everyone in that one go. Once you are ready to move them to the next step, you can move them to in process from here. You can accept them, or you can archive them from here as well. In the archive section, there's a couple of sub statuses. So you got didn't start, dismiss, move, resigned, kind of extra status indicators just for your reporting. And you can have as many archive volunteers as you want on the system. So those statuses is a really simple way for you to see, how many applicants have I got, how many in process that I need to follow up with, and how many accepted into my program. You can click on these statuses at any point and get an idea of, what the next steps are. From the front page as well, we've got a couple of indicators and alerts to kind of make that process a little bit simpler. So pretty simple things like birthdays. So that's going to show up in the next 7 days. You can send out a text or an email. We've got volunteer anniversaries. So that is obviously automatically tracked based on years of service. That can be sent out email or text as well. And then things like custom field approvals. As I mentioned, you can add an approval step to those custom fields. In this case, it's mostly uploading of documents. So you can basically view those documents, make sure they're legitimate, check a number for the working with children's check, and approve that when you need. Qualifications can also have approvals. As I said earlier, you can basically see what expiring qualifications are coming up, send out an email individually or in bulk that the volunteer needs to update that information. And then you've got the hours approvals as well on the system. So as well as that, we've got volunteers on the clock. So that's basically to do with your hours. A number of different ways to do hours in the system. We've got a clock in, clock out system. So once a volunteer clocks in, they can do that through an app, or they can do it through a QR code, a time clock. That will show you how many volunteers you have on the clock at that one time. That can be really important for things like emergency responses, seeing exactly how many people have clocked in. And then also that can be added a kind of layer of approval to those hours. So if volunteers, for example, they can clock in, they can log hours when they're finished their shift. Administrators can also log hours on their behalf. This can be done at the volunteer level individually, or you can do it in bulk, for 10 people at the same time if they've done that one shift. And that approval step just makes sure that what they're entering, is legitimate and it's got all the information you need to approve that. Other things on the front page, you've got your news. So you can send out newsletters to volunteers. That can be directly to their portal. So when they go onto the app, they can basically see that news pop up straight away. And then you've got other things like comparisons. So that is basically, an easy way to see your reports. You can change the different time periods to get an idea of, things like hours, interactions. These are things that volunteers will be entering when they do clock out or when they do log their hours. And you can ask them questions, obviously use that for your reporting when you need to. Now, when the volunteer applies, a profile is created for them in the system. So this profile basically will show you how many hours they've done in the past, any badges they have. This can be hours, years of service, different training or qualifications. Administrators or volunteers can edit their contact info at any point in the system. Custom fields can also be edited. So if you do need to upload documents, upload signed documents, anything like that in the system, that can be done as an administrator. Same with the qualifications. You can go and approve some of those, edit or update that information when you need. You can communicate with volunteers directly from their profile. So you can email or text them from the profile, which is then saved in their history. So you can see email or text history sent from other admins as well from the system. You can also do confidential note logs that basically the volunteer won't see. Other admins can see the note log. So if you have a phone call, an in-person discussion with a volunteer, that can be saved on their profile and kind of helping out, with that double handling, communicating with other admins on their profile if you need. You can roster a volunteer from their profile. This can be really handy for things like your regulars. So basically, depending on what role they do, you can go into the profile, filter out certain shifts. Say if they work every Monday and Friday, you can go in and then in bulk, you can assign that volunteer from their profile. So this, really good for those regulars, getting those regulars in first, then kind of seeing what other shifts you need filled. Once they do log hours, also once they are assigned to shifts, that shows on their roster. You can get a nice looking monthly schedule from the profile here. That can be emailed to volunteers. Volunteers can also access this from their profile. And volunteers also have an option to connect their personal calendar. So Google, Outlook, Yahoo, whatever they use, to the system. So if you do update a shift on the day, they will get a notification on their phone, which everyone knows is usually the best way to communicate with volunteers. Once they do log hours, that will show in their profile. Admins can also start a clock or do a time log entry from the profile if the volunteer doesn't have access to a phone, for example. And you can also do things like committee groups for volunteers. So this can be different groups the volunteers are in. This can be a way for you to group volunteers, so it's easier for you to search for them in the system. Yeah, this is quite popular with volunteers. You can give them access to basically contact each other via the app, via an email, with other committee members. Up to you if you have that activated, basically, depending on the committee group. I'll show everyone quickly the rostering system. Nice and easy layout. It's all color coded. Basically, the blue means you've got your shifts covered. The red means you don't. So you can see we've got two vacant shifts there, and 1 and 9 that are filled. So basically from here, you can click on those different shifts. You can go in and unconfirm people if you want. You can send out emails and reminders from this page. When you do want to assign a volunteer, you can use different filters. So must be qualified, must be signed up for the role, have no overlapping assignments. Once you filter out those volunteers, you can then individually assign those who come up, or you can in bulk assign all of those. So if, for example, you're needing the volunteers to sign up for things themselves, you don't want the administrators assigning volunteers. It's basically the volunteers first in, best dressed. In that case, you can send emails from here. You can let people know that a shift is vacant. You guys are qualified for the shift. Please sign up as soon as possible. So that can work both ways when you need it. Really easy way to do that rostering from the system. As well as the rostering, we've got really detailed reporting in the system. So basically important to note that anything in the system that's a field, you can report on. So that can be feedback, it can be hours. Basically, whatever field you have in the system, you can get really detailed reports like this. You can export this, whatever it is you need the data for. You can always export that. We've got something called a raw data report, which basically gives you access to every single field in the system. So you can export every field if you need. You can go into the search criteria and change some of that information. Yeah, really, really simple system to do everything from the reporting. We've got built-in reports, or we've got general reports you can do all in one. I'll just show you really briefly a couple of other modules we have. One, the e-learning training. So basically, you can do e-learning training in the system, which can be videos. In this case, this video has a questionnaire connected. Basically, this can be embedded from things like YouTube. So the volunteers can watch a video from their profile. You can send a link out. You can have questionnaires that has a certain pass mark. Yeah, but really simple way to do that training. With the embedding of videos as well, gives you control to do as much kind of content as you need in that training. Last thing I'll show you is surveys. So basically, this is a new system, a new module in our system. You can send surveys out, and basically this one has specific answers. So you can do multiple choice questions, tick boxes, rankings, whatever you need to do. This can be sent out at any point. So if you want feedback on a specific event, that can be sent out. If you want general feedback, that can be sent out at any point as well. This is really popular at the moment, being a new feature. I know a lot of organizations kind of had to rely on things like SurveyMonkey and a couple of other systems that were doing the surveys were quite costly. So good news is we can do that in our system. Really simple to use as well. And admins can kind of create their own surveys and then view the responses directly from here. Awesome. That is the demo. Yeah, that's basically most of the system that I've gone through there. Of course, that is the administrator side and some of that information. So I'm just going to show you a couple of testimonials from some organizations around the world who are current users of Better Impact at the moment.
So why did I select this product? It integrated with my background check product. I can tell you that the sales and customer support people are outstanding. Direct contact with a person that's talking me through all of the steps, doing training for us and my whole team. And inside the product is so much help. 24/7, you can chat with a person who's really a person. At 3 o'clock in the morning when we were first converting, I was talking, I was playing, I was trying to figure out something. I hopped onto the chat and I was thinking, there's nobody going to be around at 3 o'clock in the morning, Eastern Standard Time. And lo and behold, within a couple minutes, I was talking to a guy who was on the other side of the globe, who was answering all of my questions for me. It is fun and kind, and I don't ever feel stupid. So I can't say enough about the customer support and the sales part.
Yeah, it was value for money and on budget for what we wanted. Easy to implement. We had 300 volunteers already on the books. So we were able to extract the information into a spreadsheet, and then they took it away and uploaded all the information in the right place, gave the usernames and the passwords so that we could then write out to the volunteers with. Better Impact is I call it a cradle to grave. It's an application right the way through a volunteering journey. So once they do their application form, they're already setting up their volunteer page. But the team were very, very supportive. As I said already, very, very supportive.
Why did we go with Volunteer Impact? Because there were a few other options out there for us. It's definitely an affordable management system. It was something, it actually cost us less to move towards Better Impact than it was with our former system. There were a lot of volunteer-centered features, allowing the volunteers to own their own experience. And that was something that we saw right off the bat. We had heard of some great features like self-scheduling and how volunteers can go in and update and change their own addresses, schedule time off for vacations. So these were things that were definitely selling points for us. My impact page gives the volunteers the opportunity to absolutely own their experience with us. Everything that they need is at their fingertips. If they need extra resources or easy ways to communicate with us, it's all there through that.
I've been using Better Impact since about 2016, 2017, and I absolutely love it. My favorite part of the system, and it's really hard to actually just come up with one thing, but I would certainly focus on the personal profile reporting. You can fully customize it to get as much data as you need, as much information as you need, or as little as you need in that one report. It's incredible.
Well, yeah, great to hear some testimonials there, and very diverse range of features that are everyone's favorite. So that's always great to hear that positive feedback. So a little bit about Better Impact. So now you've heard about my story. I'll tell you a little bit about Better Impact. So it actually started by a fluke. Former CEO Tony had a passion project for building a web-based volunteer management software solution for a residential hospital with a global impact. We've got offices in UK, Canada, US, and Australia. We've got customers all around the globe. We specialize in volunteer management software, volunteer impact. We also provide modules with donor, client, and member solutions that all integrate together. we're a here to help company. Support is a huge thing for us. We've got really good reviews on the Trustpilot system. We've got a 4.7 out of 5 with over 300 reviews from clients. So we pride ourselves on our support, on our security, and being a really good system altogether, and doing that end-to-end management.